Yo, what's up guys? Josh, Magic Card Poker here, back with another video. So as you guys saw from the last session, it was a pretty unexpected one to say the least. You know, we were just getting beat up all night, and then at the very end, we had a really nice upswing, and yeah, ended up booking a very good win, pretty much looking to extend the win streak. So I believe that last session was win number 4, and then we're looking to have win number 5 today. And you know, back at the old stomping grounds, favorite 1-3 room in Vegas, best seats in the city. When you're sitting for hours on end, I feel like the seat is actually very important. I actually got a massage today as well, so hopefully, you know, keeps me relaxed and in the zone for this session. So the keys for today are just to basically, you know, play my game, play the arrow strategy. Coach Arrow actually had a nice analogy, which is from the movie 21. So the MIT card counting team, basically they had a winning strategy, and then one guy thought that he had a better strategy and deviated, ended up losing his whole, you know, blackjack bankroll and went bust. So I feel like whenever I deviate from Coach Arrow's strategy, I end up, you know, not running too well for the most part and punting. So just sticking to the plan, you know, tighten the pre-flop ranges, make sure my bet sizings are correct, and yeah, not making any donkey plays basically, right? So with that being said, I'm ready to grind, ready to hit the 1-3 streets of Resorts World.
In the first hand of the session, the button straddle is on for $6. The under the gun and low jack both limp. I look down at ace 10 suited in the hijack, so I go ahead and limp as well. The cutoff calls, the small blind gets out of the way, the big blind comes along, and the button checks his option. The flop is favorable for us as it comes ace 6 ace with 2 hearts, so we flop trip aces. The big blind checks. The under the gun now bets $20, which is a little over half pot. The low jack gets out of the way. With trip aces, I could definitely raise here since there is a hard draw on board, but since this is really multi-way, I want to make sure that the players behind me come along, so I go ahead and just flat call. The button calls, and the big blind gets out of the way. The turn is a jack of spades, which shouldn't change too much, so when the under the gun now slows down and checks to me, I go ahead and bet around half pot of $50, and to my surprise, the button now goes all in for $154. The under the gun gets out of the way, and with trip aces, I'm not going anywhere. I go ahead and call. The river is a 7 of hearts, which completes the front door flush draw and isn't looking too good for us until the button turns over ace 5 offsuit for trips with a lower kicker. So we take this one down with ace 10. Somehow ace 10 holds. Usually the problem with ace 10 is if you hit the ace, the 10 can usually get outkicked by ace jack, ace queen, ace king. Happy to take this one down very early on in the session. A few hands later, the button straddle is on again. I'm under the gun and I look down at the pocket rocket, so I go ahead and bump it up to $16, and only the middle position makes the call. The flop comes 4-10 queen with 2 hearts, which is a pretty decent flop for us, so I go ahead and just bet half pot for $20, and the middle position makes the call. The turn is a king of clubs, so I start slowing down just because I feel like this guy's calling range could definitely smash this board. King 10, king queen both make 2 pair, and any jack gives an open-ended straight draw, so I go ahead and check, and the middle position player checks back. The river is a 6 of diamonds, which is a pretty safe river, so I go ahead and bet half pot once more for $40 for value, and the middle position folds. So not sure what you had here. Maybe you had like pocket 7s, 8s, 9s and wanted to float one card, or you could have had the hard draw and didn't hit. I feel like perhaps I could have fired another turn bet just to charge the hard draw, but I just feel like there are a lot of instances where I could get value owned. However, the way I play this hand, I don't really have too much information. For example, if I just fire small, let's say like 25% on the turn, so $20, and he raises me big, then I could have got out of the way. But nonetheless, always happy to take a pot down with pocket aces, since winning a smaller pot is always much better than getting your aces cracked. All right, around 30 minutes later, there's a bunch of limpers, and I go ahead and look down at 10-6 suited in the big blind, so I go ahead and check. So we're going 6 ways to the flop of 10-4-6 with 2 spades, so I flop top 2. I go ahead and check, planning to check raise. The under the gun checks behind me. The hijack now bets $12, which is perfect for my trap. The cutoff calls, the button and small blind fold. I now raise the $35, the under the gun folds, but the hijack and cutoff both come along. The turn is a 9 of hearts, which seemed like a relatively safe card for me at the time. Mainly because in the moment I was looking out for the spade draw, making sure that no spade hits, kind of failing to account for the fact that this is a really like connected board. Like you know, 5-7 makes an open ender, 7-8 got there, you know, jack. Basically there's a lot of combinations that could make a straight or straight draw. So I bet $70 since I thought I had the best hand, and I wanted to charge any draws. The low jack is out of the way, and the cutoff now goes all in for $116. I go ahead and make the call for $46 more. The river is a 7 of clubs, so now there's a 4-liner, and the cutoff shows 8-7 offsuit for the turn straight. This was really sneaky just because I guess technically it was a gut shot, but this guy had a double gutter, so basically an open ender, and yeah, we lose this one. I think the only thing I could have done differently is on the flop when I check raise, I could have made my sizing like $55, and perhaps this would have folded out any straight draw. But it's always hindsight 2020, right? Since in the moment you want people to call when you have the best hand, but then when you lose like and get outdrawn, then you think like, okay, maybe I could have like bet bigger and folded them out. So yeah, not too happy with how I played this hand. If I'm gonna go the check raise route, I think I need to just size up here. And then when the turn hits and it's super connected, while I'm out of position, I could have maybe bet smaller. I think in hindsight, maybe like $30 bet. And if the guy shoves, then that's an easy fold for me. But it's always hard to say too, because I've seen players in 1-3 shove when they have a spade draw here, like the nut spade draw. And it's really hard to fold top 2. So yeah, I don't think there's too much I could have done in this situation. So around 30 minutes later, the under the gun +1 limps. I look down at Jack 10 suited in middle position, so I bump it up to $16. And this is clearly not enough as we get 6 callers. So we're going 7 ways to the flop of 9-7-2 with 2 clubs. The small blind and under the gun check to me. I go ahead and bet $35 as a continuation bet. Low jack gets out of the way. The hijack calls, the cutoff folds, the button calls, and the small blind and under the gun +1 also get out of the way. So now we're going 3 ways to the turn, which is a queen of spades. So I go ahead and slow down now, even though I pick up more equity, which in hindsight is definitely a mistake, which I'll touch upon later. So I go ahead and check. The hijack checks as well. And the button now bets $75. With my monster draw, you know, open-ended straight draw as well as a flush draw, I'm going nowhere here, so I make the call, and the hijack folds. The river is a 4 diamonds, and now I go ahead and check. The button bets $75, and I go ahead and fold. The button who was in this hand, we'll get involved with him in a bit, but he was a pretty loose player, kind of like a calling station. So not sure if what I'm about to say would have worked to get him off the hand, but I texted Coach Air about this hand right afterwards, and he said I needed to bet really strong and like really just like slam all 3 streets because I have such a monster draw. I think the $35 was too small on the flop. I feel like in hindsight, you know, the pot is already like $115, so I need to bet at least 75 here just to rep a strong hand. And then let's say I get 1 caller right, the pot's like 260 on the turn, and then I could have probably set myself up for a river jam. And I know this is more of a high variance route, but I think one thing I did wrong is I just played my draw way too passive here. And it wasn't just any like random draw with a super small flush. Like jack high flush is definitely really strong, and I also had a straight draw. So in general, with this board texture and, you know, being super multi-way, I think I made the mistake of just betting too small and then checking the turn. I would have liked myself to bet bigger, fire the turn, and potentially just bluff the river here. Results aside, maybe the guy hero calls anyways. I think I would have liked that line a lot better. But curious to hear what you guys have to say about flopping draws and picking up more equity. Do you continue to put the pedal to the metal and go hard with the barrels, or do you slam the brakes? Curious to hear how you guys navigate this situation, especially when it's super multi-way. So shortly after this, we're in a hand where there's 3 limpers to us, and we're in the small blind with queen unsuited, so we go ahead and bump it up to $15. The big blind gets out of the way, but all 3 limpers come along. So 4 ways to a flop of 8, 10, jack, all spades. So we flop a straight, but there's a potential flush on board. And I go ahead and check just because I'm scared of the monotone board. And the action actually checks around. The turn is a jack of hearts, which pairs the board now. And I figured that no one had a flush yet, so I go ahead and bet for $30, which is a little under half pot. The under the gun calls, the low jack folds, and the hijack also comes along. The river is now a 2 of diamonds, which seems like a really safe card for me, so I think I have the best hand here. And I go ahead and bet $120, sizing up. Not really sure why I sized up so much. I think maybe I was just trying to target trip jacks or a 2-pair type of holding. But the under the gun calls and the hijack folds. The under the gun shows jack 8 offsuit, so he has a boat. So I just freaking value own myself. I really don't like how I played this hand either. I feel like on the flop, I need a bet here with my straight. I understand that there's a monotone board out there, but I think even like a 1/3 size bet here could have been good. Or you can even argue firing a bigger bet just to see where I'm at. Regardless, I need a bet here on the flop. And then I think in this specific instance where the guy had Jack 8 offsuit, I'm not sure if I could get away from it, but you know, perhaps when the turn comes and I fire again, he raises me and then I can just easily fold and save my river bet, which was massive here. So yeah, totally misplayed this hand, and kind of curious to hear what you guys have to say when you flop a monster when there's a monotone. For example, you know, I have a straight here, but what if I flop like a 2-pair of set? How do you guys typically navigate these type of situations? All right, so the next notable hand is not for another 30 minutes. So in this one, there's 2 limpers, and I look down at Jack 10 suited on the cutoff. So I go ahead and raise the $20 since this is a strong hand, and I bump up my raise size just because there's 2 limpers ahead of me. The button and both blinds get out of the way. The under the gun, who was the opponent from the previous Jack 10 suited hand who bet on the river and I folded, he makes the call, and the hijack gets out of the way. So the flop comes 8-8-2 with 1 diamond and 2 hearts. So we just have 2 overcards and a backdoor flush draw. When the opponent checks over to us, we go ahead and c-bet for half pot $20, and he goes ahead and makes the call. The turn is a 6 of hearts, now completing the front door flush draw. When the opponent checks to me, for whatever reason, I just go ahead and bet $45, hoping to just fold him out here, but that clearly doesn't happen as he like pretty quickly calls, and we go off to see a river, which is the 7 of clubs. When he checks over to me, I'm sitting here with Jack high. I'm pretty sure I'm not good here. Literally, queen high beats me. So I go ahead and bet almost pot of $160, and now this guy check jams for $251. Obviously we can't call here, and I have no idea what he had, but yeah, we lose this one, and very not pleased with how I played this hand. I feel like I could have shut down on the turn, just because the other thing I have to take into account is when you're trying to bluff players, there's specific player types that are better to bluff. For example, someone that's extremely tight. I think you know, the other day, like, just to give an example, actually this was last night, we were shorthanded and I opened with like queen 10 offsuit or something. I got 3-bet really small, so I opened 15, got 3-bet to 40, and then I go ahead and make the call, and I was like middle position, this guy was button, so flop was all small cards, and I go ahead and check, and then this guy c-bets pretty small, like $30, and I go ahead and raise the $80, and he just quickly folds. So I feel like this specific opponent was on the tighter side in the sense that he normally just bet when he had it and then folded when he didn't. He was a solid player but played pretty face up, and I think players that play like this are easier to bluff just because they're not going to call down super light. However, when you're playing against someone who's a calling station, that's like the last type of player type you want to bluff. The way you make money off of calling stations is you have good hands and then they overcall and pay you. For example, if I had like a flush here, perhaps this guy would have paid me off, or like if I had a boat, basically like a top of my range nutted hand. But the way you don't play against these guys is what I did in the 2 hands, this one as well as the previous hand with Jack 10 suited, where I just freaking river bluff and donate. So yeah, we misplayed this hand again, and the funny thing is I bet 3 streets when I had nothing, whereas in the previous hand when I had like a flush draw and then turned an open ender, I only bet 2 streets. So I should have actually done this line on the previous hand when I had Jack 10 suited, but clearly, yeah, both hands didn't pan out, and we lose this one. So honestly, up until this point, we've been getting destroyed this whole session and haven't really taken down too many big pots. Really just like kept donating to that one guy who was the calling station player, but at least he was a nice guy. Anyways, around 30 minutes later, we're in our next notable hand, which starts with 2 limpers to us, and we look down at ace king offsuit in the cutoff, so we bump it up to $20. The button cold calls, the 2 blind gets out of the way, and the under the gun limper calls, but the middle position limper folds. The flop comes 3-7-5 with 2 clubs, and the action checks around. The turn's the queen of clubs, which completes the front door flush draw. So when the under the gun checks to me, I go ahead and bet $25 with the second nut flush draw, and to my surprise, both players come along. The river's a jack of clubs, which gives us the second nuts, so when the under the gun checks to me again, I go ahead and size up and bet $115 to make it seem like I'm trying to steal the pot. But unfortunately, this price is too much, as both players make the fold. So happy to win this pot, but feel like I missed out on value. I think perhaps on the river, I could have done just a value bet, maybe like $30, just because I knew I was good here, so it was a matter of if someone was willing to pay me off with a lower flush. But I'm assuming they didn't have any clubs here, so a little confused why both players called the turn but then folded the river. And looking back, I think I made my river sizing too large, since it's really hard to call that big of a bet when you don't really have like a nutted hand. Yeah, not really happy with how I played this. I think I missed a bet on the flop and then bet too large in the river. So happy to win this pot, but definitely feel like I missed out on some value. Moving along, in this hand, there's 4 limpers to us, and we look down at King Jack suited in the small blind, so we bump it up to $21, mainly sizing up to charge limpers, and because, you know, I'm a sucker for suited Broadway hands, so I want to play a bigger pot here, which arguably is actually a bad move since I'm in the worst position in the small blind. But anyways, the big blind calls, the low jack, hijack, and cutoff get out of the way, and the button, who's one of the limpers, comes along. So going through is the flop of 2-3-5 with 2 diamonds. So we flop a flush draw as well as 2 overs. And I go ahead and check here just because I'm out of position and just wanted to see what my opponents would do, since if I bet and then got raised, then I'm basically just inflating the pot for myself to hit my draw. The big blind bets $50, which is actually a pretty sizable bet. It's like 2/3 pot. The button gets out of the way and I go ahead and make the call with my flush draw. The turn is now a jack of hearts, giving us a pair to go along with the flush draw, and I go ahead and check to my opponent, and he actually checks back. The river is a 4 of diamonds, which is a great card since not only does it give us the flush, but it also makes any ace a straight here. So now I go ahead and bet $120 for value, and to my surprise, the big blind goes all in for $232, and I just snap call, show my cards, and we're good. Sometimes, especially if someone's leaving, I just don't make them show their cards. No idea what this guy had. Perhaps I should have let him show the cards for the vlog, just so we know. But he probably maybe had like a straight here or a lower flush and thought he was good. But I pretty much had like, you know, the 3rd nuts, or I guess 4th nuts, right? I lose the 5-6 suited, ace 5 suited, and then ace high flush. So 4th nuts, I was feeling good about this. And yeah, happy to take this pot down. Actually pretty content with how I played this hand. I don't think I did anything too wonky. Perhaps I could have bet the turn on the jack, just because I picked up equity here. But since the guy bet on the flop, I kind of wanted to see what he would do. I actually just thought he would continue on the turn as well. But yeah, happy to take down one of the biggest pots of the night. So in this next hand, we're in the cutoff with pocket aces, and we go ahead and open up the action to $20. The button calls, the small blind gets out of the way, and the big blind defends. The flop comes 7, 8, 4, 2 clubs. We're not holding the ace of clubs. This is not a good flop for us just because it really smashes our opponent's calling range, especially the big blind. However, when the big blind checks to me, I go ahead and bet half pot for $30, and the button actually raises to $90. The big blind gets out of the way, and holding the best starting hand in the game, I make the call. The turn comes a 9 of diamonds, and the action surprisingly goes check, check. And the river's another 8, which seems like a good card since any 2-pair would get counterfeited now if he had like 7-4. Okay, actually, the only 2-pair that would get counterfeited is like 7-4 because 7-8 or 8-4 is a boat now. So yeah, now that I'm looking back, this is actually a bad card. But for whatever reason, I thought I was good here. I go ahead and bet $80. I took his turn check as a sign of weakness. However, the button shoves in my face for $229, and I just, you know, I can't call here, so I go ahead and fold. In hindsight, I think the turn check was actually a sign of strength, since I've seen this line time and time again. When people check raise, then check the turn, they always have a freaking monster on the river. We saw this exact same line during the win punt, where the guy basically flopped 2-pair and then turned the boat, and then I caught up on the river. So yeah, I think in hindsight, on this type of river where you check the turn, it's really just like a check call or check fold here on the river. Yeah. And also, I think my flop bet is too big here. $64 pot on the flop. With this type of board texture, I know I was trying to charge the club draw, but I think I can probably bet 20 to 25 just to gather information, and then perhaps just fold to the raise. I know it's super nitty, but the problem is I don't have much backdoor outs, right? If I had the ace of clubs, I can make the call for runner flush, but without the ace of club here, I'm just getting dominated by 2-pair sets, straights. This board is not good for me in this situation. So not really happy with how I play this hand. I probably could have made an exploitative fold in the flop, but at least I didn't lose too much. I think the worst is when you get stacked with aces or kings even. I feel like kings you're always losing, but yeah, on to the next one. So in this hand, there are 4 limpers to us, and we look down at pocket sixes on the big blind. So we go ahead and check our option, just looking to set mine for cheap. The flop comes 6, queen, 8 with 2 diamonds. So we go ahead and flop the set. The small blind checks over to us. We go ahead and bet $10, just looking to build the pot here. The low jack calls, the button folds, and the small blind now check raises to $45. And I go ahead and just flat call here because there are players that act behind me and I also have position on this guy. So assuming the other two players fold, we'll be playing the rest of the hand in position, which is exactly what happens as the other two players fold. And we go to a turn of ace of clubs, which is a pretty good card for us since if he had ace queen, then, you know, we're going to get his money. And yeah, also the diamond draw doesn't complete if he was check raising with a flush draw. But now the button actually sizes up and bets $110. So we're a little worried about pocket eights. I don't think this guy would have pocket queens since he'd raise that hand. And now that I'm thinking about it, ace queen might not be likely as well since he probably would have raised that hand as well. So not sure what he had. Perhaps he had like 2-pair. But yeah, he bet $110 and I go ahead and just flat call here, just looking to reevaluate on the river. And the river is a 5 spades. The small blind goes all in for his remaining $90. I go ahead and snap call and he shows a queen of diamonds and we don't see his other card. We probably should have made the opponent show both cards. I have a habit at this point in my grinder journey, I'm not making people show when I'm, you know, winning a big pot like this, but happy to take this pot down of almost $500. The session is starting to turn around for us. We were pretty stuck and now I think we're actually up. So that's always really a great feeling when you get unstuck in this session. In the next notable hand, around 20 minutes later, the undergun limps. We look down at the pocket rockets again from the cutoff. So we go ahead and raise to $15 and the small blind gets out of the way. The big blind calls and the undergun limper comes along. The flop comes 6, jack 4, 2 clubs. So this is a decent flop for us since it's not too connected. And really, if someone hits a jack here, we can actually get paid off. So when the action checks over to me, I go ahead and bet $35, sizing up mainly just because there's a flush draw there. The big blind folds and the under the gun makes the call. And one thing to note here is the under the gun player who limped called is actually our friend Mario, the dealer. So, you know, you guys know who he is from the other 2 sessions. We don't have the greatest track record against Mario the dealer, and I felt like there's some table talk going on at play, especially now that we're heads up and we have some history. So when the turn is an ace, you know, I'm feeling really good because I'm just thinking like, oh shit, I got top set, I'm invincible, I'm gonna win this hand for sure. So when he checks to me, I go ahead and bet $5 just because, you know, we have history and I just felt invincible with top set. And of course, he's not going anywhere for $5. And then the river is a 2 of clubs, which completes the front door flush. And when he checks to me, I think I'm good here just because, you know, we got a set of aces, so I can't lose anything, right? So I bet $100, just flicking the black chip in, you know, feeling all good about myself. And then he snap calls with 4-7 suited of clubs. So he flopped bottom pair with a flush draw and then we let him get there. So yeah, we lose the Mario again. Completely misplayed this hand. I texted Coach Arrow after this and he like yelled at me saying that turn bet was absolutely atrocious. I should have just smashed the turn for like 80% pot or whatever. Just deny any equity from any club draw he would have had. Or even if he had a set, just really charging the maximum. Since one thing is, Coach Arrow had a really good point. Mario's like one of the nittiest players out there. So when he's calling the flop bet, which is a pretty big bet, he's definitely holding something pretty good since, you know, at the very least, it would be top pair. And the reason I didn't think that he would have a flush draw is just because, I don't know, in my head, I just assume he's really nitty. So I feel like, I feel like he only plays pocket pairs. But yeah, that's just like a misread on my end. Obviously, this 4-7 suited was probably like him wanting to, you know, crack me, which he did. But yeah, totally misplayed this hand. Like, fuck, can't beat Mario and we lose this one, which is actually a pretty sizable pot of $326. Okay, so just 15 minutes later, we're gonna cover our last notable hand. So there are 4 limpers to the button who bumps it up to $16. We look down at pocket 9s in the small blind and we go ahead and make the call. The big blind calls, the under the gun +1 and low jack fold, and the hijack and cutoff come along. So going 5 ways of the flop of jack 4-8, 2 hearts. And this is a decent flop for us as, you know, we have outs for straight if the action checks through. So I go ahead and check here, just being first to act and out of position. And the action actually checks around. The turn is a 9 of diamond, so we big middle set. And I go ahead and bet $80 now, just leading for pot, just because the board texture is extremely wet with 2 flush draws on board, as well as potential straight draws. The big blind hijack and cutoff get out of the way, and the button, who's the original raiser, makes the call. The river's a 3 of hearts. Now bring in the front door flush draw, and I go ahead and slow down and just check here. Planning to check call, but the opponent checks back. We table our hand, and we're good. So this is actually the same guy we hit the set on earlier with pocket sixes. So we win another decent sized pot, just recovering our stack from the last hand where we totally misplayed versus Mario the dealer. And yeah, that's gonna do it for this session. Happy to lock up a profit. Could have been a bigger profit if we didn't donate to Mario, but at least he's a nice guy and always fun to play with. And as you can see, even though we had a profitable session here, we're still making a ton of mistakes. Especially as I'm recapping these hands, I'm noticing a lot of mistakes that I'm making. So I think a good note, especially if you're a new player or trying to improve, is to analyze both your losing as well as winning hands, just because obviously when you lose a hand, it's really easy to think back and analyze what you could have done differently to win it. But I think when you win hands, that's actually when you should really dive deep to see if you could win more money, just because, you know, Coach Arrow says that everyone gets the same hands. So it's really just about maximizing value on the hands you win and then minimizing your losses when you're behind. All right, guys, we just finished up the session. So yeah, as you guys saw, I won the very first hand and the second hand. And then it was up like $200 or $300. I think $200 something dollars. And I should have just left because I ended up swinging down a lot. I think at one point I was down like $600, and then we started just making some cards, man. In probably like one orbit, we're able to double up, triple up, I think. But that's just poker. I feel like it's all about just making the right decisions and not getting tilted. And I think my tilt management has gotten better. Granted, you know, last night I was in the hole and got out. Tonight I was in the hole and got out. So it's hard to say whether or not it's actually gotten better, because I feel like true tilt management is, you know, when you actually have a losing session and like, how do you respond to that, right? Do I go to a different casino in DGen or do I not do that? And I had a lot of really good hands that had mistakes on my part, because I was texting Coach Arrow a lot just on the bet sizing and what I should have done. So I felt like even though I almost lost today from playing longer, I feel like if you want to be a profitable poker player, you have to be comfortable putting the hours in, especially when the games are good. Even if you win at first, then you swing back down, because in the long run, right, you're supposed to win money. And just in general, live poker players make a lot of mistakes. So even myself, I made a lot of betting mistakes where I think had I bet properly, then, you know, I would have got people off hands who hit it, or maximize values on hands that I did win at Showdown. So I feel like every session has something to learn from, which is why I love this journey. And I'm excited to continue it. Like, the fact that I have like 423 subscribers now is awesome. Like, I'd never expected to grow that fast on YouTube. And yeah, I think the plan is just to keep going. In terms of the numbers, I was in for, you know, 2.5 buy-ins and then out for 12.23. I think the profit was around $200. I'll just pop the numbers in the screen. I need to double check if I was, you know, my rebuys to make sure they're correct, just because I always top off. So sometimes I lose track. But I do update my poker tracker app every time I rebuy, so it should be accurate. Win number 5, we locked it down somehow. I'm gonna try to keep the streak going, so stay tuned for that. But for now, that's gonna do it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.